My mother told me to cancel my wedding and hand over $60,000 so my sister could have the one she deserved. When I said no, she threw hot coffee in my face in front of everyone. The heat hit first, not the humiliation, not the disbelief, not even the fact that my own mother had just assaulted me in a room full of relatives, neighbors, my sister's future in-laws, and people who had watched me grow up. Just heat. It struck the left side of my face and neck in one vicious sweep, soaked into the collar of my white dress shirt, and sent a sharp, blinding burn across my skin. Before my brain caught up to what had happened, I heard the cup hit the hardwood a second later. Then, I heard myself make a sound I didn't recognize, not a word, just pain. The room went dead silent. That kind of silence only happens when something crosses a line so completely that nobody knows how to step around it. I stood there with coffee dripping off my jaw, my pulse slamming hard in my throat, my vision narrowing on my mother across the table. Elaine Cole was still holding her hand out from the throw. Her breathing was ragged. Her face was flushed. And even then, even with 60 people staring at her and me standing there half-scalded in the middle of my sister's engagement party, she was already trying to rearrange reality fast enough to stay on top of it. That was always her gift. Control the story before anyone else could name what they'd just seen. I could feel the burn spreading under my skin, smell the coffee in my shirt, taste metal at the back of my mouth. She looked straight at me, her eldest son, and said the 6 words I still hear in my sleep. "Now look what you made me do. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 36 years old, and I'm a founding partner at Redstone Equity Partners, a private investment firm based in Charlotte. We manage just under $1 billion in assets now, depending on the quarter. I built my share of that from nothing that anyone handed me. I didn't grow up around money. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house in Weddington that always looked better from the outside than it felt inside. My father, Thomas Cole, worked in commercial insurance, long hours, unpredictable commissions, a man who learned early how to make himself smaller in his own home. My mother, Elaine, ran everything else, not just the house, but the tone, the rules, the narrative. She managed perception like it was currency. And me. For most of my life, I was something between an expectation and a tool. I paid my way through UNC on scholarships and night shifts, warehouse work, then campus security, then anything that covered rent and books without asking for help I knew wouldn't come. I graduated, took an analyst job in a mid-market fund, worked 80-hour weeks, and built enough leverage to start my own firm with 2 partners by my early 30s. No safety net, no family capital, just time, pressure, and decisions I didn't get to be wrong about. My sister Sophie is 29. She's the kind of person rooms rearrange themselves around. Easy smile, effortless charm, the kind of beauty people forgive things for before they even know what they're forgiving. My parents paid for everything: college at Duke, sorority dues, a semester in Barcelona she announced over dinner like it was a weather update. Her jobs never lasted long, but they never had to. There was always something else lined up, always a cushion. She is my mother's daughter. In a way, I've spent years choosing not to dissect too closely. If I was built to carry weight, Sophie was built to be carried. And in our family, that difference was never subtle. The part nobody in that room knew, the part I had made sure stayed buried, started in the fall of 2021. My father called me on a Tuesday afternoon. He doesn't call without a reason. In our family, information usually moved through my mother, filtered and reshaped before it reached anyone else. So when I saw his name come through directly, I stepped out of a meeting and took it in the hallway. His voice was off, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Ethan, we've got a situation." That was how he said it. Not panic, not even urgency. Just something compressed, like he'd been holding it down too long and didn't have the strength to keep doing it. The situation was the house. They'd refinanced a few years earlier, something about upgrades, tuition gaps, things my mother had decided were necessary. The new payment was just under $2,500 a month. His commissions had dropped. They were behind, not one payment, several. There was already a notice on the account. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't have to. He just laid out the facts the way a man does when he's out of options but not ready to say it out loud. Then he added one thing before we hung up. "Don't tell your mother I called." I stood there for a minute after the call ended, looking at nothing. Then I handled it. I called Laura Bennett, my attorney, estate and financial structuring, someone who understood discretion as more than a preference. Within a week, we had set up a trust, clean, indirect, nothing that traced back to me without intent. Payments routed through an account that looked routine enough not to raise questions. The first one went out that November. They kept going every month after that. 37 months. A little over $115,000 total, counting the back payments that kept the bank from moving forward. No one knew. Not my mother. Not Sophie. Not even Natalie at first. She found out about 8 months in when she saw a statement on my desk and asked me, directly, to explain what she was looking at. That's how she is. No circling. I told her. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react immediately. Just listened all the way through. Then asked the only question that mattered. Do they know? No. A pause. Do you want them to? I shook my head. It wouldn't change anything. She studied me for a second, then nodded once. Okay, she said. Then what do you need from me? That was it. No speech, no judgment. Just alignment. Over the next year, I added one more thing to the trust. Sophie's student loans. A little over 30,000. Cleared in full. Routed through the same structure. Labeled in a way that made it look like a federal adjustment. Something believable enough that she accepted it without digging. I didn't correct her. I didn't correct any of it. I'm telling you this so you understand the exact shape of what happened in that living room. I wasn't withholding out of spite. I was carrying more of that family than anyone in it realized. And my mother still threw coffee in my face. Natalie had a shift that morning. Trauma cases don't run on schedules. And neither does she when she's in it. She told me she'd be done around 2. Maybe later. Depending on what came through the doors, she'd head straight over after. No time to change. Probably still in the same clothes she wore under her coat at the hospital. I'll be there, she said. That was enough. The party started at 2. I showed up exactly on time. Navy blazer, white shirt, dark jeans, clean lines. Neutral, the kind of outfit that doesn't draw attention but doesn't give anyone an opening either. I had a gift in my hand, an Italian espresso machine Sophie had mentioned once, months ago, in passing. I remember because I wrote it down. I always write things like that down. My mother met me at the door. Elaine was already in full performance mode. Silk blouse, pearls, energy turned up just enough to fill the room without looking like she was trying. She kissed my cheek. Light. Controlled. Like we were exactly the kind of family she wanted people to believe we were. You made it on time, she said, smiling. I said I would. Natalie, still at the hospital. She'll be here around 3:30. Of course she will. The smile didn't change, but something underneath it shifted just slightly. I stepped inside. The house was full. 60 people, easy, family, neighbors, Sophie's friends, Connor's side. Conversations layered over each other. Glasses clinking. Music low enough to feel like background. Loud enough to keep things moving. Everything arranged. Furniture pushed just enough to make the space look bigger. Flowers set in better vases than we actually owned. Champagne flutes lined up with the kind of precision that says someone has rehearsed this. Sophie was at the center of it. Light dress. Perfect hair. Laughing easily. Turning just enough to include whoever was speaking to her. She looked like she belonged in that moment. Like the entire room had been built around her. Connor stood near the kitchen. Drink in hand. Working the room. Firm handshakes. Back slaps. That slightly extended smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'd known him a little over a year. Long enough to recognize patterns. Not long enough to care about them. I grabbed a drink. Moved through the room. Conversations I'd had versions of my entire life. Safe topics. Work. Weather? Travel? Enough engagement to be polite, enough distance to stay out of it. At 2:28, my mother touched my arm. Come help me with something. Her tone was light. It wasn't about help. She guided me toward the kitchen, then past it without slowing, down the short hallway toward my father's study. The door was already open. He was inside. That told me everything I needed to know. This had been planned. My mother stepped in first. I followed. She closed the door behind us with a soft, deliberate click. Then she turned around, still smiling. We need to talk. My father was already in the study, standing near the desk with his eyes down like he'd been placed there. My mother stayed between me and the door. Sophie's wedding is running over budget, she said. Connor's family is contributing, and we think it's only right that you do the same. How much? 60,000. I looked at her, then at my father. No. Her smile thinned. Ethan, don't be difficult. I'm not. You're her brother. I know that. My voice stayed flat. That seemed to bother her more than anger would have. We're finalizing numbers this week, she said. Venue, flowers, band, transportation. Sophie should not have to scale down her wedding when you can cover the difference without feeling it. I'm not giving Sophie $60,000. My father shifted, but he still said nothing. My mother folded her arms. Family helps family. I set my glass on the bookshelf. Then the family that promised her this wedding should pay for it. Her face changed. After everything we've done for you. That almost made me laugh. I had paid for my own degree, my own rent, my own climb. But there was no point arguing facts with someone who treated facts like furniture she could rearrange. So, I kept it simple. The answer is no. Her jaw tightened. You have more money than you know what to do with. You don't know what I have. You're a founding partner at a major firm. And that still doesn't make my money yours. I moved toward the door. Let's not do this in here, I said. Tell Sophie congratulations. Leave me out of the budget. My hand was on the knob when my mother said, "You selfish bastard." I turned back. The hostess voice was gone now. This was the real one. You stand there acting like you built yourself, she said. Maybe you did, but you came from this family. You owe this family. I looked at her. No, I don't. That was enough. She yanked the door open and walked straight into the party. I followed because I still thought this could stay private. That was my mistake. She went to the center of the living room just as the room hit one of those natural pauses parties get every so often. Enough silence for a voice to carry. I want everyone to hear something, she said. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. I felt the pressure in my chest before anyone even looked at me fully. That old, sick feeling of knowing humiliation was about to go public. My mother put a hand over her heart. Performance. Always performance. My son Ethan, she said warmly, who has done very well for himself, has just refused to help his own sister have the wedding she deserves. The room held still. Sophie's face shifted first, shock, then hurt. Connor looked from her to me with quick, calculating attention. Mom, I said quietly. Stop. She ignored me. I asked him for one thing. One act of generosity toward his sister. Apparently, even that is too much. Take this private, I said. You want private now. She turned toward this coffee service on the sideboard. Silver urn, cream pitcher, stacked cups. I had seen that set up at family events my whole life, and never once thought of it as dangerous. She picked up a full cup. There was one clean second where the room understood something bad was about to happen. Then she threw it. The coffee hit the left side of my face, my neck, my collar. Heat tore across my skin. The cup hit the floor near my shoes. I heard a woman gasp, heard Sophie scream my name, heard someone say, Jesus Christ. And through the burn, through the shock, through 60 people staring at me while coffee ran down my shirt and over my hands, I heard my mother say the words that split the afternoon in half. Now look what you made me do. The next several minutes broke apart in my head, almost as soon as they happened. Heat. Noise. Hands I didn't know reaching for napkins. Coffee soaking deeper into my shirt, the sharp smell of it rising off my skin, while the burn kept pulsing across my cheek and neck. Someone pulled out a dining chair, and I sat because standing suddenly felt less automatic than it should have. A woman from Connor's side handed me a stack of cocktail napkins. Another brought water and didn't seem sure what to do with it once she got there. My mother recovered first. It was an accident, she said. Too fast, too loud. He startled me. I looked up at her through stinging eyes. Even then, even with the cup on the floor and 60 people staring at the evidence running down the front of my shirt, she was already trying to get control of the story back. Sophie was 3 feet away. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She was crying. But not at me. Not for me. She was saying something to Connor about the party being ruined. About everything getting destroyed, like the worst thing that had happened in that room was the collapse of her afternoon. My father stood in the doorway between the study and the living room, motionless, hands at his sides. That image landed harder than I wanted it to, not because it surprised me, because it didn't. I touched my face carefully. Redness? Pain? No blistering yet, minor burn, I knew that much. Still hurt like hell, and more than the burn. More than the silence, more than the humiliation, what settled into me then was the old familiar thing. I was on my own. The front door opened at 3:22. Natalie came in wearing dark slacks, a black sweater, and the navy fleece she wore on hospital days. She scanned the room once and found me immediately. Then she saw my face. She crossed the room fast, dropped her bag onto the nearest chair, and took my jaw carefully in one hand. What happened? I'm okay. You're burned. I know. Her eyes moved over the coffee stains on my shirt, the napkins in my hand, the red spreading across my cheek and neck. She checked the skin without making a show of it. Fingers light. Focus absolute. Behind her, my mother stepped forward. Voice already repaired. Natalie. Thank God you're here. It was just a family misunderstanding. Ethan was being difficult and things got out of hand. Natalie looked at me again. Then at my mother. Her voice was flat. You threw hot coffee in his face. It was an accident. No, Natalie said. It wasn't. My mother stiffened. This is a private family matter. Natalie straightened. No. A private family matter is something you handle behind a closed door. This was public humiliation followed by assault. The room went still again. My mother wasn't used to being named accurately. Most people softened language around her. Natalie never did. She turned to the room. I stayed quiet because Ethan asked me to. He protected all of you long past the point any of you deserved it. I'm done helping him carry that alone. I felt my stomach tighten. Natalie knew everything. The trust, the mortgage, Sophie's loans, the numbers. My mother laughed once. Brittle. This is not your place. Natalie ignored her. For the last 37 months, Ethan has been paying this family's mortgage through a private trust setup so none of you would know it came from him. Silence. Not a gasp yet. Something heavier. My father looked up. The house was behind, Natalie said. Foreclosure was close. He covered the back payments and every payment after that. More than $115,000. She paused, just long enough for it to land. Without him, this house would have been gone. You could feel the math moving through the room. Faces changing, expressions recalculating backward through years of dinners, holidays, assumptions. Sophie stared at me like she'd never seen me before. My mother's face emptied. That's not true. Natalie turned to her. It is. And I'm not done. Nobody moved. Sophie, she said, those student loans you thought disappeared under some federal adjustment, Ethan paid those too. In full. Quietly. Because he didn't want to embarrass you. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Connor looked at me differently after that. I saw the shift happen. Quick. Ugly. Calculating. Natalie saw it too. He is also not just doing well, she said. Ethan is a founding partner at Redstone Equity Partners. He built his career from the ground up while carrying this family behind the scenes. That broke the room. Aunt Linda sat down hard. Someone near the kitchen said, Jesus! One of Connor's friends lowered his phone. My father looked like he'd forgotten how to stand. Nobody said another word. My father finally spoke. Ethan, he said, like the name itself had weight in it. Is that true? I looked at him. Then I nodded once. That was enough. And my mother, standing in the center of that living room, looked for the first time not angry, not righteous. Cornered. Natalie came back to me then. One hand on my shoulder, the other still steady at my jaw. You should have told me sooner it was this bad, she said quietly. I looked at her. I know. Across the room, nobody was looking at my mother the way they had been 15 minutes earlier. That part was over. For a few seconds after Natalie finished, nobody spoke. It was like the room had been hollowed out from the center. 60 people standing in the remains of an engagement party, each one trying to reorganize the last 3 years of my family in real time. You could see it happening on their faces. Surprise first, then disbelief, then the slower, uglier recognition that they had all just watched the wrong person get blamed. Sophie looked wrecked, not embarrassed, not defensive, genuinely wrecked. Her hand was still over her mouth, her eyes fixed on me like she was trying to line up 2 different versions of her own life and couldn't make them fit. The loans, the house, all the invisible scaffolding she had mistaken for luck or timing or grace. I could see the moment she understood that none of it had fallen from the sky. Connor had his arm around her, but his attention kept sliding back to me. That shift in him was instant and obvious. It had nothing to do with guilt. It was valuation. He now knew exactly who I was, exactly how much influence I had, exactly how wrong he'd read the room. Men like Connor reveal themselves most clearly in recalculation. He took one step toward me. Ethan, I had no idea. Don't, I said. Just that. Nothing louder than conversation level. He stopped immediately. Across the room, my mother looked like someone had removed the floor from under her without warning. Elaine had spent her whole life managing optics, controlling tone, assigning roles. She knew how to dominate a room as long as everyone agreed to keep playing their part. But now the structure had broken in public, and there was no clean way to put it back together. Aunt Linda was staring at her with open disgust. One of the women from church had set her drink down and folded both arms. Bradley's mother, no. Connor's mother looked from me to Elaine with the expression of someone revising future wedding conversations on the spot. My father still hadn't moved much, but something in his face had changed. Not strength exactly, more like the first visible crack in a lifelong surrender. And the room understood something all at once. I had not been the cold son refusing to help his sister. I had been the man holding that family up from underneath while they talked about me like I was selfish. That truth moved through the crowd with a force stronger than shouting ever could. My mother's knees gave out without warning. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies teach people to expect. There was no slow sway, no hand to the forehead, no time for anyone to catch her. 1 second she was standing in the middle of the living room, with everyone looking at her. and the next, her legs folded, and she dropped sideways into the space between the coffee table and the armchair. The sound of her hitting the floor snapped the room back into motion. Someone screamed. A glass tipped over. Sophie lurched forward, but Connor caught her by the elbow before she could get there. Natalie was already moving. That part didn't surprise me. Whatever she felt about my mother in that moment, and I knew she was furious, none of it mattered once someone went down. She crossed the room, dropped to one knee, and shifted instantly into the calm, clipped focus I'd seen 100 times in hospital corridors. "Give her space," she said. "Now." People listened. Connor's mother dropped beside her and said, "I'm a retired nurse." Natalie nodded once. "Good. Check her airway." My mother was breathing. Pale, but breathing. Natalie found a pulse, asked for the time, asked if anyone had seen her hit her head, then looked up at Connor and said, "Call 911. Tell them adult female. Syncopal episode. Conscious status uncertain. Breathing intact." He moved fast after that. For all his social instincts, even Connor understood the difference between a messy family scene and a medical emergency. My mother came around after maybe a minute, maybe two. Long enough for the room to feel suspended, short enough that the panic never fully settled into catastrophe. Her eyes opened unfocused. She looked confused first, then frightened. She did not look at me. That landed harder than I expected. Sophie was crying now. Really crying. Not the strained, performative tears from earlier. This was different. Shoulders shaking, mascara running. Something in her had broken for real. Guests began pulling back toward the walls, lowering their voices, gathering bags and coats in that awkward, guilty way people do when they realize they've accidentally stayed for the collapse of something intimate. The engagement party was over. What remained was just damage. I stood near the window with the cooling coffee stiff in my shirt, watching Natalie help the woman who had thrown it at me. And that was the part that stayed with me. Not because it redeemed my mother, because it clarified Natalie. She didn't help because Elaine deserved it. She helped because that's who she was. When the paramedics came through the front door, lights washing blue across the front windows, Natalie stood and gave report in a voice so steady, it made the whole room sound small. A few seconds later, she came back to me. "Ready to leave?" she asked. I looked once around the room. "Yeah," I said, "I am." Natalie and I had almost reached the front door when my father caught my arm. Not hard, just enough to tell me he was afraid I would keep walking and never come back. I turned. Thomas Cole looked older than he had an hour earlier. Not tired, not shaken. Older. Like something he had been holding in place for years had finally slipped. "Ethan," he said, his voice rough. "There's something else." Natalie went still beside me, behind us. The paramedics were lifting my mother onto the stretcher. Sophie was crying on the stairs. Guests were pretending not to listen while listening to every word. I looked at my father. "What is it?" He glanced toward their living room, then back at me, and I could see the moment he decided he was done protecting the wrong person. "Your grandmother left money," he said. "There was an estate, a trust." I waited. When she died, it was supposed to be divided in half. Half to your mother, half to you. For a second, I thought I'd heard him wrong. "Half to me," he nodded. "You were 22. Your mother told the estate attorney you didn't want it. Said you had signed a disclaimer releasing your share." The air in my chest changed. "I never signed anything." "I know," he said. "She signed it herself. Forged your name. Told them you wanted no part of it." I stared at him. Around us, the room had gone quiet again. People understood they were hearing something worse than a family fight. "How much?" "The full estate was $360,000, he said. "Your half was $180,000. At 22, I felt the number hit somewhere deeper than the coffee had. Scholarships, night shifts, the apartment with the broken AC I sweated through my first summer after graduation. The years of debt, the choices I made because I believed there was no cushion under me. And the whole time, there had been one. My mother had taken it. What did she use it for, I asked. My father swallowed. The kitchen remodel. Some of Sophie's tuition, credit cards, travel, household expenses. A lot of it just disappeared. I looked at him for a long second. "And you knew?" His face folded inward. "Not then. I found the paperwork almost 2 years later in the filing cabinet in my office. By then, it was gone." He stopped, then forced himself to continue. "I should have told you. I should have done something. I kept telling myself I was keeping the family together. But the truth is, I was afraid of her. And you paid for that." Natalie stayed next to me, silent and steady. I thought about being 22 with $180,000 that belonged to me. What it would have changed. What it might have made easier. Then, I thought about who I had become without it. Maybe the same man, maybe not. Either way, that wasn't the point. The point was that she had stolen years from me and called it family. "Do you still have the documents?" I asked. He blinked. "What? The estate file? The forged disclaimer? Transfer records? Anything with her signature on it?" He stared at me for half a second, then nodded. "Yes. I kept everything." "Good." That was all I said. Because once the shock burned through, what came after it was cold, not grief, not rage. Direction. I looked at Natalie. She already knew. Then I looked back at my father. "Get me the documents before we leave," I said. I called Laura Bennett at 6:14 that evening. Natalie and I were back at her townhouse in Myers Park. I was sitting at the kitchen island with a cold compress against the left side of my face, my shirt changed, my burn cleaned, and a glass of bourbon untouched beside my phone. The estate documents were spread out in front of me. Original trust language, distribution records, the forged disclaimer with my name signed in a hand that was not mine. Laura answered on the second ring. "What happened?" I told her everything. Not dramatically, just the facts. My father's confession, the inheritance, the forged signature, the supporting documents now sitting in front of me. The coffee at the party came last, and only because it had happened first. She was quiet for 3 seconds. "Ethan," she said, "if these documents are authentic, your mother forged a legal disclaimer and diverted estate assets that belong to you. That is civil exposure at minimum, potential criminal exposure too, depending on how far you want to push it." "I'm not interested in theater," I said. "I know. That was one of the reasons I hired Laura. She never wasted time pretending the law was about emotion. To her, it was structure, leverage, consequence. She walked me through it cleanly. Fraud, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, recovery options, settlement pressure, documentary strength, the practical distinction between suing to recover what was mine and trying to burn my mother's life to the ground. When she finished, she asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the forged signature again. For a long time, I had believed my mother's damage operated mostly in mood, favoritism, control, something corrosive but survivable, something you learn to build around. This was different. This was theft with paperwork. This was her reaching back into the beginning of my adult life and taking away a chance I never even knew I had. "I want the money recovered," I said. "With interest if we can get it." "You can. I want it done cleanly. It can be. And I'm not spending the next 5 years of my life trying to destroy her." Laura paused, then said, "Good. That keeps you in control." After I hung up, Natalie came over and rested a hand on the back of my chair. "What did she say?" "That I have a case." Natalie nodded once. No surprise there. "And I'm filing," I said, civilly. "I want back what was mine. I'm not going after her just to go after her." Natalie leaned against the counter across from me, arms folded, eyes steady on mine. "That sounds like you." I let out a breath. "I'm not letting this go," I said. "I know, but I also don't want the rest of my life organized around my mother." Natalie was quiet for a second. "Then don't make it about revenge," she said. "Make it about a boundary with legal force." That was exactly right. A line, not a performance, not an emotional speech, not some grand act of family destruction, just a line drawn where it should have been drawn years earlier. I looked down at the papers again, then at the faint red reflection of my own face in the dark kitchen window. My mother had taken enough. She was not getting the future too. Laura filed in September. My father cooperated immediately. He turned over the original estate file, the forged disclaimer, the transfer records, and every piece of correspondence he still had. I think helping on the case was the first clean decision he had made in a very long time. And he seemed to know it. The case never made it to trial. Once Laura sent over the evidence package and outlined exactly what discovery would look like, my mother's attorney pushed for settlement. There wasn't much room left to posture. The documents were too clear. The signature comparison was too clean, and the money trail ran exactly where it shouldn't have. The final number came in at $208,000. Principal, accrued interest, and enough pressure behind it to make dragging things out a losing idea. I recovered what was mine. Then I made 2 decisions. First, I shut down the quiet rescue operation. The trust stopped covering my parents' mortgage. No more monthly payments, no more invisible support, no more pretending that keeping that house afloat was my responsibility. Second, I decided what kind of man I still wanted to be after all of it. I moved $52,000 into Natalie and my wedding fund. Not to stage something extravagant, just to build our day without compromise, without debt, and without anyone else's hand in it. Then I put another 52,000 into a separate account for Sophie. No strings, no lecture, no conditions. Not because she had earned it. Because I had spent too much of my life letting my family decide what my help meant, and I was done confusing exploitation with generosity. If I gave, it would be because I chose to. On my terms. Inside my own boundaries. I texted Sophie the account information with one sentence. This is yours, no conditions. She called less than half an hour later, crying too hard to get much out at first. When she finally did, all she said was, I didn't know. I know. I told her. And for the first time in my life, helping someone felt like a decision instead of a duty. My mother called once in October. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a little over 4 minutes long and contained the word sorry twice. Both times buried inside longer sentences about misunderstandings, stress, and how things could have been handled differently. It wasn't an apology. It was an attempt to soften the record. I didn't call her back. Sophie did, though, more than once. Not to defend herself, not to rewrite anything, just to talk. Slowly. Awkwardly. Like someone learning a language late and trying not to misuse it. I respected that. Natalie and I got married in November. Small ceremony. 22 people. A restored inn outside Asheville with cold air, cedar smoke, candlelight, and a dinner that lasted long enough for everyone to stop performing. My father came. He sat quietly, kept his head down, and when it was over, he hugged me once like he understood it wasn't owed. The next morning, Natalie made coffee. Real coffee. Good coffee. We sat on the porch in coats, hands wrapped around warm mugs, the mountains still gray with early light. And that was the thing I noticed. Coffee, finally. Was just coffee again? Not a weapon, not a memory. Just warmth. That was how I knew I was going to be fine.